Hey, folks, welcome back to the Mac and Mike Show. I'm Mac, and of course, my partner in crime, my brother in the military BDUs is Mike, and he's next to me here. We're again doing a meeting by Zoom for lots of different reasons. Mike's been a little bit under the weather, and I have some issues with caregiving for family members. So um, you might see a few more Zoom meetings before this year is over, but hopefully we'll get back to our regular sessions. I'll tell you honestly, I miss being able to sit in the back porch with Mike and just talk about 101 things. And, we oftentimes we'll decide through phone calls and text messages during the week what we want to talk about for our podcast. Well, we get together and we have such interesting conversations that oftentimes we change what we're going to talk about at the last minute, which I think is a good thing because that way we get something that both of us are passionate about, or perhaps both of us that have opposite views on things. I'm not real sure we're going to have opposite views on today's conversation, but the topic that we decided we would lead with and maybe add in a few other things, because there's a lot of things going on the week before Thanksgiving in 2024. But the topic we thought we'd lead with is the escalation of the war in Ukraine. Um, this past week, the Russians used an intercontinental ballistic missile. I think it was a hypersonic missile. I'm not real sure that we have similar technology, or we've admitted to having similar technology. And the ICBM, of course, is typically and only used, exclusively used for launching a nuclear warhead. This particular ICBM was modified to carry a conventional warhead, and it was shot into Ukraine, which is close enough to hurl a hand grenade into. You know what I mean? I think the message that the Russians were sending us is, hey, listen, NATO, we have this new weapon technology, and you should pay attention because you don't want to be on the receiving end of this. What escalated the war on the Russians' part was the United States of America, through NATO, had given Ukraine some long-range missile systems that enabled them to shoot missiles into the geography that is typically considered Russia, even their capital city. That those long-range missiles had not been made available to Ukraine as part of their warfighting materiel prior to this past week or this past 2 weeks, 10 days. In addition to that, America, again under the umbrella of NATO, just installed a new missile base in Poland. It's a defensive missile base, and it's based on the Aegis missiles. And supposedly, our claim, NATO's claim, is that is just for defense should the war in Ukraine escalate beyond Ukraine to NATO countries and the Russians start using missiles longer range. I think this is a significant escalation, and I think it puts the United States on the brink of World War III. I'm not sure my brother Mike agrees with me. The fact that they decided to use this ICBM technology, albeit with not using a nuclear warhead, but using a conventional warhead, I think is a serious step on the part of the Russians. And I think giving the Ukrainians the capability to strike deep into Russia with missile systems that they had not been able to do before is also a significant escalation of the war on our part. Now, if you've watched the Mac and Mike podcast before, you know my attitude about this war. The war was lost when Russia invaded. Ukraine has no ability to beat Russia, either in a conventional or a non-conventional, that is a nuclear war. And in my opinion, there are no good guys in this war. The government of Ukraine and the government of Russia are both corrupt. Mike, tell me where I'm full of shit.
Well, first, the missile is intermediate range. It's not an ICBM. It was mistaken for an ICBM initially. It has some of the characteristics. It has 6 re-entry vehicles, and that's like the MERV system that we developed years ago. Um, I go back to the very beginning. We've talked about the Minsk agreement
Yes.
and how there's disagreements on both sides. Of course, the Western view is Russia was more in violation of the Minsk agreements than Ukraine. Russia's opinion is NATO's and Western encroachment into Ukraine and the Russian population that lived in the Donetsk area and Crimea were their primary reasons for going to war. So, whatever. But when war finally breaks out, what I never understood from the beginning is who in the hell tells a country like Ukraine, you can't launch missiles into Russia? They're launching missiles into my country. You're going to tell me I can't launch my shit into theirs, even if you're providing it. Now, I did a little research since we talked about this yesterday. And if you look at how arms dealing goes around the world, the United States is the number one arms dealer in the world with 40 to 45% of the market. If you add in Europe, France being number three, but if you add in all of Europe, we are 72% of the arms dealers in the world. Russia is number two next to the United States with somewhere between, these are just estimates, between 10 and 15%. China's in there too, but they're like 6 to 8%. So we are a big provider of weapons. Now, because we're providing weapons, we provide those to anyone who will buy them. Now, in the Ukraine's case, I guess we've been giving them weapons plus loaning them the money to buy it. And I think that's the big problem for most Americans. Like, why are we spending our money protecting them? You say Russia's going to win. Well, Russia didn't win in Afghanistan. We didn't win in Afghanistan. We didn't win in Vietnam. We didn't win in the Middle East. So the question is, can Ukraine sustain long enough that Russia just says, okay, we got to pull out of here because it's just draining our entire economy and the people are getting sick. Now, 2 years ago, Ukrainians were 72% in favor of going to war with Russia and fighting for the home country. Now it's down to 42%. So there's not much we can do except wait to see where the Ukrainian people go. Now, will Vladimir Putin launch nuclear weapons? No, look, what's happening right now is he knows Trump's coming in. And he's gonna play the game with Biden as long as Biden's doing things. But in the long run, he knows he only has to wait a few more months for Trump to take office, and then things will change.
The United States is not clean in this war. Um, you know, during the time of the breakup of the Soviet Socialist Republic, when the wall came down in the 80s and there were negotiations, there were a lot of nuclear weapons that were housed, that were geographically located in Ukraine. And the United States State Department, through our emissaries and we went to Ukraine and said, look, if you give up your nuclear weapons, we will defend you if you're attacked by Russia. That was our promise to them, and they trusted us, and they gave up their nuclear weapons. If Ukraine had nuclear weapons, Russia would not have invaded the country of Ukraine.
Right.
That's my belief. Okay. Go fast forward a few more years in the Clinton administration. We made a commitment to Ukraine again that that we would defend them against Russia. We made a deal with the Russians at that time during the Clinton administration that NATO would not be pushed farther towards Russia and include Ukraine as a NATO country. That was a promise that the United States State Department and the President of the United States assured Russia we would not do. Now, obviously, since then, America has made inroads into many of the former. So, Poland's now part of NATO. There are a number of those Eastern Bloc countries that are now part of NATO, which was a promise that we gave Putin and Russia that we would not do. In addition to that, there's a significant amount of moral and ethical and other issues that are going on. The United States of America has very significant interest in spreading, you know, the DEI and the woke methodology as far as we can throughout the world. The Russians, especially Putin, who is a member of the Russian Orthodox faith, does not appreciate that. All of those factors come into the play when Russia invaded Ukraine because of what America and NATO was doing very early on in the war with Russia. And Russia, I don't believe, really wanted to invade Ukraine. I think they remember when they massed all the troops at the border and they were like 10 miles deep with troops. They were waiting for somebody to negotiate with them, so they did not go to war, and that never happened. If you remember Boris Johnson representing NATO, when Ukraine and Russia initially held some peace talks, Boris Johnson went to Ukraine and said, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do a peace. We're going to give you everything you need. We're going to make sure you win." The Ukrainian military is what, about 1/10 the size of the Russian military, something like that.
Something like it.
It's significantly smaller, and the weapons they have, for the most part, are not comparable to the Russian weapons because Ukraine, as you noted, we're an arms dealer. The United States is an arms dealer. Um, and very honestly, if Ukraine didn't get it from us, they could probably get it from the $80 billion worth of weapons we left in Afghanistan when we pulled out of there sheepishly, right? So I don't think America has clean hands in this war. I think if you look historically on our promises to Russia, our promises specifically to President Putin, they have all, for the most part, been hollow, worthless promises that we did not keep. I think the United States of America should be embarrassed by that because I think as a nation, we should keep our word and we should be honorable negotiators. Having said that, I agree with you. I agree with you that Russia knows that a new president is coming into power in the United States of America. And I would even be willing to suggest that as the incoming president, that the president made certain contacts, maybe through intermediaries or what have you, to kind of, hey, Putin, President Putin, lay back a little bit. Let's let this January 20th inauguration go through, and let's see if we can't come to some reasonable, responsible, negotiated settlement. There's no doubt in my mind that Russia is going to get a significant amount of the territory, the geography, the ground that they now hold, which is Ukrainian territory. I think that's a win, Mike. You may disagree, but I think that's a win if they get a significant amount of that geography, that territory, that ground that used to belong to Ukraine is now supporting Russian troops. I also think that while the parties involved in the war will negotiate the terms of the settlement of the war, I think that it'll be clear that Ukraine lost the war when the settlement is made. And I think if you follow the words of Donald Trump, his words have been and continue to be, let's stop the killing. Let's not have people dying over there. I don't think he said anything about, who gets to win or, what we're going to do to attack or he said, let's stop the killing. I think that's a noble sentiment given the history between these two nations and also our horrible negotiations that have gone on since the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah, I don't have anything more to add.
Well, we'll see. We'll see, Mike, what happens. I think it's interesting. If you remember the last time Donald Trump ran for president, remember he had a phone call with Zelensky to congratulate him on his victory in getting into office. And remember during that phone call, he said something about, well, who knows? Maybe you'll find, what happened with the Bidens and Burisma during your term in office. And remember how they turned on him and how they tried to make that into some sort of uh, criminal act.
Yep.
They're not doing anything about it today, are they?
Nope. Well, they already determined that Joe Biden was too old and feeble to stand trial, according to the FBI. So it really doesn't matter. Um, I'm not so concerned about that. But the other subject you wanted to talk about was Trump's cabinet picks.
Yeah. Before we do that, do you think there's any possibility that before January 20th, Joe Biden steps down from his presidency in order to let Kamala Harris become president, even for a short period of time?
No, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, you may be right. You don't hear any of those kind of rumblings, but I know that the Democratic Party is real big on um, the appearance of things, right? Not necessarily the substance of things, but they're real big on the appearance of things. And if Biden would step down, even for a couple of weeks, and allow Kamala Harris to become the first woman president, the first woman of color to be president, even if she doesn't do anything other than ceremonial kinds of things, and she's there whenever Trump is sworn in as the new president. Um, I also think that it may be necessary for the Biden family to get a presidential pardon for some of the things that Hunter Biden and Jim Biden and the Biden family did during his time as president. And I wonder whether or not Donald Trump will do that. I know, Donald Trump is tough. There's no doubt about it. And he's very strict and he's very staunchly supportive of America first. But I don't think that he wants to, just like with Pelosi, right? He could have easily, or I'm sorry, Hillary Clinton. He could have easily, for the crime she committed with the secret documents and the server not protected and all the documents falling into, the hands of our foreign enemies. He easily could have had her prosecuted for that and maybe even put into jail. But he chose not to do it. He just ignored that whole story, that whole problem. And I think he's likely to do that as well with the Biden family. But as a member of the United States, a citizen of the United States, I'm not real happy about that. I think what Hunter Biden did and what the Biden family did, using using the United States of America to feather bed their own, to get certain things, certain payoffs, certain amounts of monies that enrich their family. I think that's wrong, and I think there has to be an example made of somebody so that doesn't happen in the future. I'll leave it there. So we wanted to talk about. Do you have a comment on that topic?
No, not at all.
All right. Well, let's talk about the cabinet then. You jumped into that. Let's talk about the cabinet.
Well, I guess the big one for veterans is Pete Hegseth. And I remember your initial response, and I think my initial response was, wow, that came out of nowhere. And is he really qualified? So I guess at first blush, I thought he seems a little bit young and a little bit less experienced than need be. But then who is Bush's SecDef? Is Rumsfeld.
Yeah,
He was actually a year younger than Pete Hegseth when he
yeah,
first did it in the 1980s.
Yeah.
um, under Gerald Ford. I'm not sure he really had any more bona fides, as they say, than Pete Hegseth does.
You know what, Mike? Popeye the Sailor Man would be a better sec def than Lloyd Austin. Okay. So we
Yeah,
can't help but improve there. Okay. Um, I've met Pete Hegseth. I worked for Concerned Veterans for America. He also did. I was there after he was there, but I know him, and he's a friendly guy, and he's a nice guy, very affable, pretty smart guy, smart guy. He wrote a couple of books. One of the books was War on the Warriors. I don't know if you've paid attention to this, but starting with President Obama and continuing for several presidencies since then, the United States of America has really kicked out their their war fighters from the most prominent positions of leadership within the military. And that's throughout the Pentagon and up and down all of the branches of the military. Instead, what we've chosen are a lot of very affable politician types. Okay, I look at General Milley. General Milley called the Chinese to tell the Chinese that no attack was coming under President Trump, and that he would forewarn his Chinese counterpart if there was any talk of that. Now, I don't know if you know the word treason or you're familiar enough with the word treason, but what General Milley did was treasonous.
I
You know,
don't disagree.
reaching out to our political and military opponent and telling them, "Don't worry, I promise you, I will contact you if we're about to do anything that's going to be warlike towards your nation." Um, that's treason. Milley was never charged with treason. He was never put on trial for treason, and he was never stood up in front of a brick wall and shot for treason, which is the penalty for treason, by the way. So, Pete Hegseth is a major in the Minnesota National Guard. He's a leg. He's infantry, but he also was special forces. He served three tours in Iraq and Afghanistan in wartime situations. I give him great credit for the service that he's provided. But I think if you are a major in the Minnesota National Guard, you are not as yet fully prepared for all of the intricacies and the interagency issues that exist, not only just within the branches of the service, but also with the military and our other branches, like places like the CIA and the FBI and the DOJ, because they all touch one another in various times and places for various issues. So, no, I don't think that Pete Hegseth is qualified to be the Secretary of Defense. However, if you read his book, The War on Warriors, what he doesn't like in the military is the focus on the woke attitude, the focus on the DEI, the focus on, what did Milley call it? White rage that causes so much um, uh, prejudice and in the military. Listen, you and I were both in the military. Did you care what color somebody's skin was?
No,
You cared about the color of their uniform, didn't you? But you didn't give a shit about the color of their skin.
I cared if
And
they were going to have my back or not.
yep,
That's it.
absolutely. So my point is, Mike, I think he goes into the Secretary of Defense position with an intention of eliminating the non-mission essential issues. No more DEI training. No more, if you're white, you're a racist training. No more of the woke. No more of the, we need to have more transgender in the military, transgender soldier. He's going in there with saying, look, the mission of the military is to protect this nation and to be ready to attack our enemies when called upon. And I think that's the right attitude to have. And I think what he will do as the Secretary of Defense is he will surround himself with the generals who do have the understanding of the nuances between branches and between the other parts of the government. And getting the right staff around him, I think he can be successful. I hope I hope he is confirmed. There are many people who suggest he won't be confirmed. You know, there was this issue where a woman charged him with rape, and I don't. You can look all over the internet and see the opinions of people. But Megyn Kelly did a really nice statement of what happened, and she does not believe the accuser. You know, the accuser waited 5 days to make the report. You know, she willingly went to his room after the Hegseth was visibly drunk. She, by her own admission, only had a single glass of champagne. Um, she went to his room looking fully cognizant, having all her faculties. She came out of his room fully cognizant, all her faculties. After she left the room, she went to her own hotel room where her husband and children were. One would think that if she was just raped, she might have mentioned it to her husband, just saying. So I don't believe the accusations. Neither did the police at the time. There was a full investigation, and Hegseth not was not ever charged. Now, he does have 3 divorces. He was guilty of having this affair while he was married to his third wife, who had a baby while he was still married to his second wife. So, look, as far as moral behavior, Pete Hegseth has a problem when it comes to women. But I know a lot of people in the military that have that same problem. What is it they say about a Spec 4? One thing for sure you can tell about somebody who's an E4 in the military, he's paying 22% interest on his new car. He's got an Article 15 and he has at least 1 divorce, right? That's the military. So I think Hegseth will be confirmed. Many people do not. I thought you were going to lead with Matt Gaetz, who pulled his name out of contention for the Attorney General. And I think Pam Bondi is an excellent choice for that post.
Yeah, I wanted to lead with Pete because we're both veterans, and that was the most important thing to me. I think Pam will be fine. I think she'll be great. Um, I think they'll find another position for Gaetz. He could take office again. He was voted in for 2019. I guess we'll wait and see. Again,
I think
the main criticisms against him is he had no friends. Nobody cared for him. He was a disruptor, but that's the kind of person Trump wanted. And I don't think, I guess, did he lead the charge on ousting McCarthy, or he was an
yes, he
instant?
did. No, he was the one. He personally, individually, was responsible for McCarthy being ousted as the leader of the Republicans in the House of Representatives.
Yeah. So I don't know that. I don't know how people feel about that. I think it's, again, winning a battle, but then you lose the war.
Yeah,
And so I'm not a big fan of the ultra right. I agree with them. It's not that I disagree with them. It's just that you can't get anything done if you only have 10 members in the Republican Party that are ultra conservative and the rest are trying to make deals.
right.
You can't win over time. Reagan kept pointing that out. The half loaf versus the full loaf.
I think that even constructing a Department of Government efficiency with Ramaswamy and with Elon Musk is a good idea. I don't know what they'll be able to accomplish. I think that Linda McMahon, as Secretary of Education, will be fine as far as basically tearing down the Department of Education and having a scaled down Department of Education that sends money back to the states. I think she's perfectly capable of doing that. I love the Tulsi Gabbard as NDI appointment. Um, Tulsi Gabbard, I think, is a patriot. And I think the way Hillary Clinton treated her, you know, Tulsi Gabbard is a Democrat, did not support Hillary Clinton because she thought Hillary Clinton was a warmonger, a neocon. And that's how she ended up supporting Bernie Sanders and how she resigned from her position in the Democratic National Committee because as a member of the military, she didn't want more neocons creating more senseless wars all over the country. If you listen to her give her explanation of that, it's not only very believable, but she's passionate about it. It's hard to not believe her when she talks about this. She saw a lot of the casualties that were part of those wars. Um, I think I'm interested in who Trump is going to put in charge of the VA. Um, I think that having Robert F. Kennedy as charge of Health and Human Services with his perception, if not reality, that America's food system is artificially broken through influence peddling within the various agencies that control our foods and our medicines. I don't know if that's true. I do know that many nations throughout the world, the European Union, Canada, some other first world nations, they have different versions of products that are sold in America with different ingredients. Um, and if you go search him and food safety and on the internet, you'll find him talking about a lot of different ingredients that are added to our food, either for color or for taste or for shelf longevity, that are flat out bad for America. When you find out that what is it is one out of every 10 Americans a diabetic, something like that. I mean, there's a reason why our health is not where it should be. So I think that Robert F. Kennedy intends to find out why that is, and I think that's a good thing. Um, Secretary of the Treasury is a guy that agrees with Trump. Very very smart man, Bissett. Um, Started his own hedge fund. Funny enough, at one point in time worked for George Soros in George Soros's fund, but basically left Soros based on a disagreement about how they should do things, which is probably a good thing. He probably could have made a lot of money with Soros, but he has a 3-3-3 plan, which involves tripling the energy that's available. I mean, the guy, I've heard him described as being so smart that sometimes other people don't understand what he's talking about. And maybe that's not a good thing. Who did he put in charge of the Fed? Wasn't Lloyd or wasn't the Naxet or something? He's going to try to fix the Fed, and they're going to try to reduce the deficit, right? So most of those, I think it's impressive how many appointments he's made already, because a lot of those appointments typically don't come until after the president's inauguration, right? Are there any
Yeah.
that I missed or ones that you remember specifically?
No, I don't remember specifically who that's going to be, but
They
the guy
just
in
put a,
charge of the Fed is going to stay until his term's up, and then Trump
well,
will replace him. But
yeah, that's what he
I,
says.
yeah, well, we'll see. I looked it up, and you're a little bit under on the number of diabetics. It's 11.6% of Americans are diabetics. Just as
Well, one out of 10 would be 10%, right? So
well, it's bad. It's really bad.
yeah,
So I mean that doesn't even count pre-diabetic. I'd
right,
say probably 50% of Americans are pre-diabetic.
yeah.
Heading down the wrong path, my friend.
Well, we've got some really good appointments though. Getz has already stepped down. I feel confident Pam Bondi was the AG for the state of Florida for a number of years and a 20-year prosecutor before she got elected as AG of Florida. The one thing that's common with all of these Trump appointments, and I think this is more important to Donald Trump than any other factor, these people are all loyal to him. They all owe their allegiance to him. They believe that he's going to make a difference in our country. They believe in his America First agenda. And it's like this guy who put in charge of the border, right? This Holman guy. He's tough as nails. Now,
Man,
I don't think Kristi Noem should have been named head of Homeland Security. I don't see her credentials as matching up. Um, but I can't find fault with most of Donald Trump's initial appointments or initial suggestions, requests for who's going to be running his cabinet. And all presidents do that. All presidents pick people who are loyal to them, right?
yeah, that's the point. I was also confused about Kristi Noem. I never looked into it, but it dawned on me as you were saying it. She was one of the big leaders in getting China and them buying our land out. So maybe that gave her some notoriety with the Trump campaign. I don't know.
Well, she's been a staunch supporter of his and she
Yes.
campaigned for him. So I think, again, that criteria, people who are loyal to him. Doug Burgum was named Secretary of the Interior. And you know, when the Chinese immigrants first started coming to the United States of America in the 1800s, they were discriminated against significantly. They looked different, they talked different. And I don't want America to be a jingoistic society. I want everyone to be welcome. I do think, however, that there are certain national security interests at stake when the Chinese buy up all the farmland that surround our missile silos in these various northern tier states where we have, you know, military bases with our intercontinental ballistic missiles and their silos housed, and the Chinese are buying all the farmland surrounding it. It seems to me that if they wanted to buy farmland that was not near a military facility, that might be less onerous than having the Chinese own all the ground that surrounds our military bases. It doesn't seem to me to be accidental or coincidental that that's where they're buying the farmland. And then, if you remember the Chinese spy balloon that Biden let travel completely across the country, oh, but it didn't send back any secret information. It, we blocked it. We blocked all the signals from that thing. And after it completely traversed all the United States of America across all of these then of course we shot it down when it reached the Atlantic Ocean. There was nothing to be worried about there. There's no possibility that the Chinese actually got some intelligence from that stuff so they would know where to buy ground, right? No, that couldn't have happened because Biden told us it didn't. I don't know, Mike. I think that maybe Kristi Noem is onto something when she says that we shouldn't allow the nation of China to buy up all this farmland. So, what do you think? Should we? Do we have anything else to talk about as far as the great and glorious things that Donald Trump is going to be doing for the United States of America
Well,
starting on January 20th?
with a minute and 30 seconds left, there's not much we can start to get into. I mean, it's a never-ending discussion, pretty much.
What's your favorite appointment to cabinet appointment so far?
Oh, Holman. Yeah,
Oh,
definitely. Guy's a bulldog. I can't wait to see what he does. And he knows the law, and he's just matter of fact about stuff.
I'm going to cheat on my answer because this is really not an appointment, but I'm going to say the best choice he's made so far is J.D. Vance as vice president. I did not know J.D. Vance prior to him being the candidate for vice president. but I've watched JD Vance as he's traversed the country doing these campaign stops. The guy is very smart, quick on his feet, and he knows a lot. And he's unafraid to challenge people when they're talking BS. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I guess that probably wraps it up, right, Mike? We're about done.
Back at Mike.
Out.